How have EDF behaved through all of this
Well,
project so far in getting their project
through.
accepted?
Well, there's a couple of pre-reflections, experiences worth putting on record. One is that the team who fronted the project were certainly not old CEGB English nuclear engineers and scientists and managers. One of the interesting experiences was that there was a retired manager from Sizewell B who had actually been, I think, in charge of training and safety, who gave a lot of advice. Sadly, he died, shortly after. He was a very elderly gentleman. But it was quite clear that EDF's front, the public relations they put up, were not terribly much to do with the virtues of Sizewell C as the proper site, as a good project and so on. It was part of a global sales pitch by the company who, as a result of the Chernobyl accident and then the Fukushima, the Japanese accident, had decided that there was a global marketplace for a very, very big, ultra-safe, ultra-efficient nuclear reactor. The Americans had not, a very, very mixed experience with their PWRs. Britain had had two different technologies, but it was quite clear EDF had an in-principle contract with India for 6 EPRs. They built the second 2 in China. The Chinese built them in something like 4 to 5 years. And they've got one operating which has got a very, very serious engineering problem. But Britain was clearly the access place for EDF to spread nuclear technology into Europe and more broadly. And because we had failed to complete the second phase of nuclear development in Britain, the only 1990s nuclear plant that was ever built was Sizewell B, and there were supposed to be 2, and the government cut back to 1. So
reaction.
We are talking about Sizewell C, but Sizewell C is on the site of what should have been the twin to Sizewell B. So we got a missing generation, and I think EDF thought they could get the British government because there was actually a hole in the strategic energy provision in Britain which didn't exist elsewhere. The Germans had turned against nuclear power, worried about Chernobyl and also Fukushima. So the pitch that EDF took was determined by its global ambition for this particular reactor. That's the first point. That led to their approach being, at one level, very unprofessional for the public. They put up quite junior people, they put on lots of public events and so on, but significantly they would not actually enter a public debate about the project. There were attempts to get them to come to schools, which they wanted to go to. They've actually given grants to schools, and they are in bed with, and I use the term advisedly, with the local university. They've been doing all sorts of public relations things about training and jobs and so on and so forth, but they will not actually debate with people who are intelligently opposed to it or are campaigning against it. So I think you could regard that therefore as not, in a sense, a natural or organic approach to the impact of this thing and its value and virtues and deficiencies. It was a very, very targeted approach for the locality. That's one part of it. The other part of it, and I said that the whole project has so far cost more than 500 million, more than £500 million, and incidentally Kwasi Boateng, when he was the Secretary of State, came up and apparently gave them, Kwasi Kwarteng, gave Sizewell C £100 million. He didn't give them £100 million, he gave them a treasury loan to help with the cash flow for completing the development. What has cost an enormous amount of money is the legal background to it, because the legal instrument allowing it to go ahead is a licence called a Development Consent Order, which is signed by the Secretary of State. That document is hundreds of pages long. That's where we found out that EDF didn't really want to own it. They wanted to sell it off once they'd built it. But the amount of commercial law involved in it was absolutely massive and expensive. They employed a top QC to sit for 6 months, sometimes 3 days a week on Zoom, with a huge team behind him prompting him about everything from geese flowing past to water levels to anything else. A huge amount of technical expertise was mounted and funneled through the QC. The top nuclear lawyer in Britain, if not the world, one of the top people, was brought on once to support this QC, and the inspectors deferred to this top nuclear law expert, who is a highly respected person in environmental law and nuclear law, and actually asked a legal opinion of him in front of the inquiry, you know, and deferred to him. So EDF, probably partly because of the engineering complexity and so on, but because of the legal process, obviously invested massively in just saying to the public, you know, if you challenge us, you're going to be up against vast teams of very expert lawyers. And some of the opponents, some of the campaigners actually went to local solicitors and various people to say their piece for them. It counted for nothing. This was very, very, very high-class law. The other aspect of it I think was important is that EDF made out, and this may well be true, that they actually had an inside relationship with government, so that actually whatever happened in terms of the local community, whatever happened in terms of courts, actually, you know, EDF and possibly even Boris Johnson, when he went to see Mr. Macron, they would be talking about this, and this was all going to go through. To some extent, that is probably just the way governments behave nowadays, that they always make out they've got hands on and they know what they're doing. But there's an interesting bit I'd like to put on record about this, which is that very few people know about it, but inward investment of significance, a new car factory, or in this case, a French nuclear reactor, 2 of them being built in Britain. These are all protected by international agreements called inward investor agreements, which mean, and this did come out for me about Hinkley, that should a project of this kind go ahead and be approved by the government of the day, should a subsequent government cancel it for whatever reason, then compensation would be paid to the developer. Right? That's one of the problems about multinationals and the global economy. Yep. Now, it is a view, and a quite sustainable view, that perhaps the British government did actually make some promises to EDF in Paris, saying, yes, we will support you with your new world reactor, which isn't doing very well in other parts of the world. The Indians have not gone ahead with it. Saudi Arabia is believed to be interested in a big nuclear program, but it probably won't be the EPR. Even the French are talking about a revised model of the EPR, which we are still discussing here. France has a lot of problems with its existing nuclear fleet and can't afford to renovate it. And we did do some research on the background to that. But it could well be that what has been going on and why it's taken so long, to return to the original point about the length of time, is that the French have a hold over the British government, and the British government are in a mess because if the British government cancelled the nuclear programme, it would of course open a space for the expansion of solar, onshore wind, for speeding up the very successful offshore wind in the North Sea and many other projects, but it would open up that market. On the negative side, if the British decided this is a bad project and we're going to cancel it, which is what Mrs. May as the Prime Minister came very close to doing, then we would owe a whack of money to EDF for cancelling a project which was, if you like, the very heart of Britain's nuclear renaissance project. So when you ask what EDF have done, I mean, all of it has appeared to be very local. Little promises about visiting schools and apprentices and jobs and so on and so forth. But it is actually big strategic stuff at a very, very high level. So to some extent, the approach of some of the campaigners, and it was an approach I was involved with the inspectors, was to get this level of argument at least on the record through the inspection process. Some people, I think, in the local communities, the parishes that are going to be affected by it, if it goes ahead, they thought they could stop it. I think there was another approach, just to say, let's raise the costs on it, let's actually raise as many problems as we can, let's dig deep into it, and a lot of that has actually been, I think, quite successful in denting the project, and in particular its credibility with investors, because no investor with any intelligence is going to fail to understand that this is an enormously risky, complex project, and if you get stuck with it and it goes wrong, it's very, very serious. The best practical illustration of that is to say that Centrica, who are Britain's biggest private energy provider, still own 20% of EDF's national operation in Britain. And EDF provide ordinary people's homes, they produce nuclear electricity, they do all sorts of things. Centrica have been trying to sell their shareholding in EDF for a long, long time. Nobody wants to buy it. They're stuck. So forget all the arguments about the public, about the community, and so on and so forth. We are into mega international politics about a technology which is itself very complex. So that I think, you know, EDF itself has actually had a problem about what its real profile is. So they do not come out ever directly and say, you know, this is a good project, you need this, and so on and so forth. And in practical terms, the final comment about it, at the inquiry, the answer to a lot of the environmental issues, which were both physical environment like air pollution and traffic noise on the roads, and the lighting of the construction site, should it be 24 hours, a lot of those issues, and this is worth for other people to understand, the answer of EDF was always to put up one of their senior engineers to say, look, we want this project and we're going to make it work, and you have to trust us because, you know, because you have to trust us, so the country needs it, and if it doesn't work, we will make it work. And the fact of the matter is, there's something in law called the tilted balance in planning law, which says if the government wants something, then the inspection inquiry, unless there are overwhelming arguments against something, should approve it because it's government policy. So the other tactic of EDF all the time was to say, well, if there's a problem, trust us, we're very experienced people, we have good contractors, we will solve the problem.